The smell of jollof rice and fried plantain filled the small three-bedroom flat in Mushin as Zainab Adeyemi helped her mother pack dinner for her father's night shift. At 19, Zainab was in her second year at Lagos State Polytechnic, studying business administration on a partial scholarship. Her life was simple, her dreams modest. Finish school, get a good job, help her parents, see her younger brother Ibrahim through university. Make sure your father eats, her mother Khadija said, carefully wrapping the food in layers of foil. You know how he forgets when he's working. Zainab smiled, kissing her mother's cheek. I will, Mama, and I'll make sure he doesn't stay too late. You know how he is, always double-checking the locks, even after everyone is gone. Her father, Al-Haji Yusuf Adeyemi, had worked as a security supervisor at Emerald Gardens Event Center in Victoria Island for 12 years. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was honest, and had put food on their table and paid for their education. He was a man of integrity. Her father, something Zainab had inherited, much to her mother's occasional worry. Integrity doesn't pay bills, Khadija would sometimes say with a sigh. But even she knew that some things mattered more than money. That Saturday evening in October 2009, Zainab accompanied her father to work. There had been a lavish wedding reception at the center, one of those society weddings where Lagos's elite gather in their finest attire, where the champagne flowed like water, and the air was thick with perfume and privilege. By 11 p.m., the last guests were staggering out, and the cleanup crew was finishing up. Go wait in the office, her father told her. I just need to do a final check of the grounds, then we'll go home. But Zainab was restless. The office was stuffy, and she'd been sitting all evening. She decided to walk to the storage room at the back of the property to get some air. The building was separate from the main event hall, used for storing extra chairs, tables, and equipment. That's when she heard the voices. At first, she thought it was guests who'd had too much to drink, but as she got closer to the storage room, the voices grew louder, more aggressive. She recognized the tone of an argument, the kind that made the hair on the back of her neck stand up. She should have walked away, should have gone back to the office, should have minded her business. But curiosity, or perhaps fate, made her peek through the small window of the storage room. What she saw would haunt her forever. 4 young men surrounded another man, younger, maybe mid-20s, holding a camera. Even in the dim light from the single bulb overhead, Zainab could see the terror on his face. Please, I'll delete everything. I swear, I won't tell anyone what I saw. The photographer's voice was high with panic. Too late for that, Chaik, one of the 4 men said. He was tall, light-skinned, wearing an expensive designer shirt that probably cost more than Zainab's entire wardrobe. His voice was cold, almost casual. You took photos. You saw things you shouldn't have seen. I didn't mean to. The girl, she's a senator's daughter. I didn't know she was underage. I was just hired to take pictures of the party, I swear. And you saw us with the drugs. You saw the whole thing. Another man stepped forward, cracking his knuckles. Can't have that getting out, can we? I won't tell. Please, I have a wife, a baby. The first man, the tall one with the cold voice, nodded to his friends. Make it quick. What happened next was barbaric. Zainab watched in frozen horror as the 4 men descended on Chaik like a pack of wolves. Fists, kicks, the sound of bone cracking. Chaik's screams turned to gurgles, then to silence. Blood pooled on the concrete floor. Zainab's hand flew to her mouth, stifling a scream. Her whole body shook. She wanted to run, but her legs wouldn't move. She was paralyzed, a witness to murder, unable to look away. Get the G-Wagon, the tall man said, pulling out his phone and wiping blood from his knuckles with a handkerchief. We'll dump him in Betagri. Make it look like armed robbers. As they dragged Chaik's lifeless body toward the back exit, the tall man's face passed directly under security light. Zainab saw him clearly. She would never forget that face. When they were gone, Zainab finally found her legs. She ran back to the office, gasping, tears streaming down her face. Her father took one look at her and knew something terrible had happened. What is it? Zainab, what's wrong? Through sobs, she told him everything. Her father's face went gray. We have to call the police. Right now. Daddy, those men, they looked rich. Important. What if? What if nothing? Her father's voice was firm. A man was killed. We have to do the right thing. Zainab, we have to. That night, they went to the police station in Victoria Island. Zainab gave her statement, describing everything she'd seen. The detective taking her statement seemed interested at first, asking detailed questions, taking notes. Can you describe a man? The main one, the tall one who seemed to be in charge. He was light-skinned, maybe mid-20s, wearing an expensive shirt. Designer. He had this voice, cold, like killing someone meant nothing to him. Did you see their vehicle? A black G-Wagon. I saw them loading the body into it. The detective nodded, writing everything down. We'll investigate. This is very serious. You did the right thing coming forward. Zainab felt a small measure of relief. The right thing. Her father had raised her to do the right thing. She had no idea that the right thing would cost her everything. 3 days later, the police found Chaik Obi's body in a creek in Badagry, just as the murderers had planned. The newspapers called her robbery gone wrong. But Zainab knew the truth. When she followed up at the police station, the detective seemed different, colder, distant. Miss Adeyemi, we're investigating all leads. These things take time. But I told you what I saw. Those 4 men. We need more than just your statement. We need evidence. Witnesses can be unreliable. The word stung. Unreliable. A week later, the case made headlines. Photographer killed in robbery. Family seeks justice. But there was no mention of 4 wealthy men. No mention of drugs or a senator's daughter. No mention of Zainab's testimony. It was as if the truth had been erased. Zainab couldn't understand it. She'd told the police everything. She'd done the right thing. Why wasn't anything happening? Her father tried to comfort her. These things take time, my daughter. Justice moves slowly, but it moves. But Alhaji Yusuf Adeyemi was wrong. Justice wasn't moving slowly. Justice had been bought and paid for. And the man who bought it was about to make his move. 2 weeks after the murder, Zainab was at the police station again, demanding updates, when a young man approached her in the waiting area. He was handsome, well-dressed, with an earnest expression that immediately put her at ease. "Excuse me," he said softly. "Are you Zainab Adeyemi, the witness in the Chaik Obi case?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Yes. Who are you?" "My name is Tun Kalawol." He sat down beside her, his face full of concern. "I need to talk to you about what happened that night. You see, I was there, at that party, and I think I know who killed Chaik." Zainab's heart leaped. Finally, someone who could help. Someone who cared about the truth. "You were there?" "Yes, and I'm ashamed to say the men you saw, they're my friends. Or they were." His voice cracked slightly, as if with emotion. "I've been sick about this. I tried to stop them, but I was outnumbered. I've been trying to figure out what to do. And then I heard you came forward. You're so brave." Zainab felt tears spring to her eyes. Someone believed her. Someone who'd been there, who knew what happened. "Will you testify? Will you tell the police what you saw?" Tun reached out and gently took her hand. "I want to. I'm scared. These men, they're powerful. Their families are connected. But meeting you, seeing your courage, I think I can do it. I think together we can make sure Chaik gets justice." For the first time in 2 weeks, Zainab felt hope. She had no idea she was shaking hands with the devil himself. Is Zainab walking into a trap? What will happen to her and her family? Hit that like button and subscribe to AfricanTales by Zion to find out what happens next. Drop a comment. Would you have gone to the police or stayed silent? Let us know. Over the next 2 weeks, Tun Kalawol became a fixture in Zainab's life. He called her daily, met her for lunch near her school, and even visited her family's flat in Mushin, a gesture that impressed her mother beyond measure. A boy from a good family, taking interest in our Zainab, Khadija whispered to her husband after Tun's first visit. And so respectful, well-dressed, educated. Even Ibrahim, usually protective and suspicious of any man showing interest in his sister, seemed charmed by Tun's easy manner and willingness to play football with the neighborhood boys. "He's not like those other rich boys," Ibrahim said. "He's cool, down to earth." Zainab wanted to believe it too. Tun was attentive, kind, and seemed genuinely committed to helping her get justice for Chaik. He brought her gifts, nothing too extravagant, just thoughtful things like books for her courses, snacks, a new headscarf when he noticed hers was worn. "I want to help you," he'd say, looking into her eyes with what seemed like sincere concern. What happened to Chaik was wrong. "My friends, I'm ashamed to even call them that anymore. They need to face consequences." They would meet at small cafes in Victoria Island, where Tun would ask careful questions about what she remembered from that night. "The police are moving so slowly," he'd say with a frustrated sigh. "Tell me again exactly what you saw. Maybe if I understand every detail, I can figure out how to help them build a stronger case." And Zainab would tell him everything, the exact time, the exact location, every word she'd heard, every detail she could remember about the men's faces, their clothes, their vehicle. She thought she was building a case with an ally. She was actually handing him a map to every piece of evidence that needed to be destroyed. What Zainab didn't know, couldn't have known, was that every conversation was being reported back. Every detail she shared was being used to dismantle the investigation before it could gain momentum. Tun's father, Justice Michael Caldwell, was one of the most feared judges in Lagos. Not feared for his righteousness, but for his power, his connections, and his willingness to bend the law for the right price, or for his family. That first night, when Tun had come home with blood on his shoes and terror in his eyes, Justice Caldwell had asked only one question. Were there witnesses? A girl, the security man's daughter. She saw everything from the storage room window. Justice Caldwell had made a phone call, just one, to his longtime friend and political ally, Chief Bello Ogunlade, the Minister of Justice. "I need a situation handled," he'd said simply. "Consider it done." But first, they needed intelligence. They needed to know exactly what the girl had seen, what she told the police, whether there was any physical evidence, who else might know. Befriend her, Justice Caldwell had instructed his son. Gain her trust. Find out everything. Make her think you're on her side. Then we'll know exactly what we're dealing with. Tun had protested at first. "She's just a poor girl trying to do the right thing. Can't we just pay her off? Make her disappear? If you'd been thinking clearly that night, you wouldn't have killed that photographer in a location with windows," his father had snapped. "Now we clean up your mess properly, intelligently. We need to know what we're dealing with before we act." So Tun had played his part. The remorseful friend, the conflicted witness, the rich boy with a conscience, and Zainab, raised to see good in people, to believe in honesty and justice, had fallen for every word. By the third week, Tun knew everything. Zainab was the only witness. There was no physical evidence from the scene. His father had made sure the event center security footage mysteriously malfunctioned that night. Chaik's camera had been destroyed and dumped with his body. The police file contained only Zainab's statement. One witness, one poor girl from Mushin, one obstacle between Tun and freedom. Justice Caldwell smiled when his son reported this. One witness is easy to handle, especially one with no power, no money, no connections. What are you going to do? What I always do. I'm going to make her irrelevant, her and her entire family. The machinery of destruction began quietly, almost invisibly. First, Alhaji Yusuf Adeyemi received a call from his supervisor at Emerald Gardens. "I'm sorry, Alhaji. I have no choice. You're being let go, effective immediately." "But why? I've worked here for 12 years. I've never had a single complaint." "Orders from above. I'm sorry." 2 days later, police arrived at the Adeyemi flat with a warrant. They tore through the small home, and in Alhaji Yusuf's bedroom, they found it. A package of cocaine, hidden in his closet. I've never seen that before. Someone planted it. I don't do drugs. I've never... But no one was listening. Alhaji Yusuf Adeyemi was arrested for drug trafficking. The evidence was clear, the officers said. He'd been running drugs through the event center for months. They had witnesses. They had records. All of it fabricated. All of it bought and paid for. At his bail hearing, the judge, a colleague of Justice Caldwell, looked at the evidence and shook his head gravely. Drug trafficking is a serious offense. Given the quantity found, I'm denying bail. The defendant will be remanded to Kirikiri Maximum Security Prison pending trial. Zainab screamed in the courtroom. Her mother collapsed, sobbing. Ibrahim had to be restrained by court officers. Tund, sitting in the back of the courtroom, watched it all with carefully practiced concern on his face. The next day, Khadija Adeyemi was called into the principal's office at the primary school where she'd taught for 15 years. "I'm afraid we have to let you go," the principal said, not meeting her eyes. There have been allegations. Financial impropriety. Missing funds from the school account. That's a lie. I've never stolen anything in my life. The board has made their decision. Clear out your desk by end of day. Khadija came home in tears, clutching a box of her belongings. Her husband in prison on false charges. Her job gone. Her reputation destroyed. "Mama, what's happening?" Zainab cried, holding her mother. "Why is this happening to us?" She didn't understand. Not yet, but she was beginning to suspect. When Ibrahim was expelled from school 3 days later, drugs found in his locker during a surprise search, the picture became clear. They were being destroyed, systematically, deliberately, and it was all because of what she'd seen that night. Zainab went to the police station, demanding to speak to the detective handling the case. "This isn't a coincidence. My father arrested, my mother fired, my brother expelled, all within 2 weeks of me giving my statement? Someone is trying to silence me." The detective looked at her with something between pity and contempt. "Miss Adeyemi, your father was found with drugs in his possession. That has nothing to do with your statement about the Chike Obi case. You know that's not true. You know someone planted those drugs. I know that you're under a lot of stress. Your family is going through difficulties. Sometimes stress can make people confused, unreliable." There was that word again. Unreliable. "Are you saying you don't believe me? About what I saw?" The detective leaned back in his chair. "I'm saying that we've investigated the Chike Obi case thoroughly. There's no evidence to support your claims about 4 wealthy men killing him. The evidence points to a robbery. Your statement has been noted, but without corroboration or physical evidence. So that's it? You're just going to drop it? We're pursuing all credible leads." Zainab felt like she was drowning. The truth was right there, clear as day, and no one would hear it. No one would help. She stumbled out of the police station into the Lagos heat, feeling the city closing around her. How had everything gone so wrong so fast? Her phone rang. "Tund, Zainab, I heard about your father. I'm so sorry. This is terrible." Something in his voice, something she hadn't noticed before, made her pause. A certain smoothness, a lack of genuine emotion. "Did you know?" she asked quietly. "Know what? Did you know this would happen? When you befriended me, when you asked me all those questions, were you helping your friends?" Silence on the other end. Then Tund's voice, no longer warm, no longer kind. "You should have minded your business, Zainab. You should have stayed quiet." The line went dead. Zainab stood there on the street, phone in her shaking hand, as the full horror of her situation crashed over her. She'd been played, used. Every kind word, every concerned question, every gesture of friendship, it had all been a lie. Tund hadn't been helping her. He'd been gathering intelligence to destroy her, and she'd given him everything he needed. That evening, the news broke. The case against Tund Caldwell and his 3 friends in the murder of Chike Obi was being dropped due to lack of credible evidence. The prosecutor's office released a statement. The sole witness in this case has been determined to be unreliable. Ms. Zainab Adeyemi is currently under stress due to her father's recent arrest on drug trafficking charges and has a history of making false statements. Without credible witness testimony or physical evidence, we cannot proceed with charges. A history of making false statements. They destroyed her credibility before she'd even realized she was under attack. At Kirikiri prison, Alhaji Yusuf Adeyemi heard the news in his cell. His daughter had tried to do the right thing, and it had cost him everything. He put his head in his hands and wept. At home, Khadija held her daughter as Zainab sobbed, her whole body shaking with grief and rage. "I destroyed us," Zainab cried. "I destroyed our family." "No," her mother said firmly, though tears streamed down her own face. "You told the truth. They destroyed us because they're evil, because they have power and we don't. But you did the right thing, my daughter. Never forget that." But doing the right thing had cost him everything, and the nightmare was only beginning. In his study in Ikoyi, Justice Michael Caldwell poured himself a whiskey and smiled. The Adeyemi problem was contained. The father in prison, the mother jobless and discredited, the son expelled, and the daughter branded as unreliable and mentally unstable. No one would believe anything she said now. His son was safe. The case was closed. Justice's version of it had been served. He raised his glass in a silent toast to power, to connections, to a system that could be bent to serve those who knew how to pull the strings. In Mushin, Zainab lay awake in the darkness, her mother's words echoing in her mind. "You did the right thing." But if this was what happened when you did the right thing, what was the point? She didn't know it yet, but things were about to get much, much worse. This is devastating. Zainab's whole world is collapsing. Like this video if you're feeling the pain, and subscribe to AfricanTales by Zion to see what happens next. Comment below. Have you ever been punished for telling the truth? Share your story. 3 weeks after her father's imprisonment, Zainab received the news that would break what remained of her family. She was at home with her mother and Ibrahim when the prison official came to their door. His face was grave. His eyes wouldn't meet theirs. "Mrs. Adeyemi, I'm sorry to inform you that your husband, Alhaji Yusuf, he passed away last night." The world stopped. Khadija's legs gave out. Ibrahim caught her before she hit the floor. Zainab stood frozen, the words not making sense. What do you mean pass away? My father is only 53. He was healthy. What happened? Heart attack, according to the prison doctor. He complained of chest pains, collapsed in his cell, and by the time medical help arrived, the official trailed off, shifting uncomfortably. "I'm very sorry for your loss." But Zainab saw something in the man's eyes, something that looked like guilt, like he was delivering a lie and knew it. After he left, Zainab called the prison directly, demanding answers. She was transferred 3 times before finally reaching someone who would talk to her. "Your father's death is under review," a weary voice told her. "But these things happen in prison, Miss Adeyemi. The stress, the conditions, men die. I want an autopsy. I want an independent investigation. The official cause of death has been determined. If you wish to challenge it, you'll need a lawyer." A lawyer? With what money? They had nothing. Her father's salary was gone. Her mother had no job. They were barely surviving on savings that were rapidly depleting. At the prison, whispers circulated among the inmates who'd known Alhaji Yusuf. They'd seen him the night he died, clutching his stomach, vomiting, sweating before collapsing. They'd heard him cry out that someone had put something in his food. But no one would testify. No one would speak up. They knew what happened to prisoners who talked too much. Alhaji Yusuf Adeyemi had been murdered, and everyone knew it. But knowing and proving were 2 different things. The funeral was small, held at a mosque in Mushin. Zainab's mother was a ghost, hollow-eyed and silent. Ibrahim, only 16 years old, tried to be strong, but Zainab could see him breaking inside. "We'll get through this," she told her brother, though she didn't believe her own words. "We'll survive this." But Khadija Adeyemi couldn't survive it. The loss of her husband, the destruction of her life's work, the shame of false accusations, the poverty, the hopelessness. It was too much. 2 weeks after burying her husband, Khadija took every sleeping pill in the house and went to sleep beside his photo. She never woke up. Zainab found her mother in the morning. The scream that tore from her throat brought neighbors running, but there was nothing anyone could do. Her mother was gone. At 19 years old, Zainab had lost both parents in less than a month. She and Ibrahim stood at their mother's grave, 2 orphans with nothing but each other and a crushing weight of grief. "They did this," Ibrahim said, his voice shaking with rage. "Tund and his father. They killed Mama and Daddy, as sure as if they pulled a trigger. I know. We have to do something. We have to fight back. But how? They had no money, no power, no connections. They were 2 kids from Mushin against one of the most powerful judges in Lagos. Zainab tried. God knows she tried. She went to every legal aid office she could find, telling her story, begging for help. Most turned her away immediately. Too dangerous, too powerful an opponent, too unlikely to win. One lawyer actually laughed in her face. You want to go up against Justice Callowell? You're either very brave or very stupid. Probably both. She went to newspapers, hoping a journalist might investigate. But when she mentioned Justice Callowell's name, doors closed. We can't touch that story. Too much risk. She even tried to reach the Minister of Justice directly, writing letters, calling offices. Every attempt hit a wall. Of course it did. Chief Bello Ogunlade was Justice Callowell's friend and ally. The system wasn't broken. It was working exactly as designed, to protect the powerful and crush the weak. Meanwhile, Ibrahim was spiraling. Her gentle, bright little brother was consumed with rage and grief. He stopped going to neighbors who'd offered to help get him back into school. He started staying out late, coming home with dangerous friends, talking about making them pay. Ibrahim, please. Zainab begged him one night. Don't do anything stupid. We've lost enough. Lost enough. His eyes were wild. They killed our parents, Zainab. They destroyed our lives. And they're just walking around free, living in their mansions like nothing happened. I know, but if you go after them, they'll kill you too. Please, Ibrahim. You're all I have left. But grief and rage are stronger than reason. 3 days later, Ibrahim and 2 of his friends confronted one of Tun's accomplices, David Adelik, the son of a wealthy oil magnate, outside a club in Victoria Island. You killed Chaikobi, Ibrahim shouted, his 16-year-old voice cracking with emotion. You and Tun Callowell. Everyone knows it. You should be in prison. David, drunk and surrounded by security, just laughed. Get this poor boy out of my face. Ibrahim lunged at him. David's security guards grabbed him, beat him, threw him into the street. Stay in your lane, poverty boy. Don't ever approach me again. But Ibrahim didn't stay in his lane. 2 nights later, he went back, this time with a knife, screaming that he'd get justice for his family. The security guard shot him 3 times. Center mass. By the time Zainab got to hospital, her baby brother was gone. The official report called it self-defense. A young man armed with a knife attacked Mr. Adelik's security detail. The guards acted within their rights to protect their employer. No charges filed. Case closed. Ibrahim Adeyemi, age 16, was buried beside his parents. Zainab stood alone at the grave, the last of her family, and something inside her died along with them. She had nothing left. No family, no money, no hope. The flat in Mushin would be repossessed soon. They'd already missed 2 months' rent. She had no job, no prospects, no future. She was alone in a city that had taken everything from her. For several days, she simply existed, going through the motions, eating because she had to, sleeping in fits and starts, waking from nightmares of blood and graves. Then one afternoon, she made a decision. She would confront Tun Callowell one last time. She had nothing left to lose. Maybe if she could just make him see what he'd done, make him feel even a fraction of the pain he'd caused. It was foolish, desperate, but she had to try. She found out where he worked, a luxury real estate office in Victoria Island, one of his father's business ventures. She waited outside until she saw him leaving, getting into his Mercedes. Tun. She ran toward him. Tun Callowell. He stopped, turned, and when he saw her, his face showed no remorse, only annoyance. What do you want? You killed them. You killed my whole family. My father, my mother, my brother, they're all dead because of what you did. I didn't kill anyone. His voice was cold, bored. Your father died in prison. Heart attack. Your mother committed suicide. Your brother attacked someone and got shot. None of that has anything to do with me. You know that's not true. You destroyed us. You framed my father. You discredited my mother. You murdered my brother. Careful. Tun stepped closer, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. Making false accusations against me is dangerous. You should have learned that by now. I saw you kill Chikobi. I saw you beat him to death. That's the truth, and nothing you do can change it. Tun smiled. Actually smiled. The truth? The truth is what people with power say it is. And I have power. You have nothing. You are nothing. A poor girl from Mushin with a crazy story that no one believes. Go home, Zainab. Go back to whatever hole you crawled out of and forget you ever saw anything. I'll never forget. I'll never stop fighting. Yes, you will. He got into his car, rolling down the window, to deliver his final words. Because if you don't, you'll end up just like your family. Dead and forgotten. Take my advice, disappear, while you still can. He drove away, leaving Zainab standing on the street, shaking with rage and grief. She'd lost. Completely. Totally lost. They'd won. Justice had failed. Truth didn't matter. Power was all that mattered, and she had none. That night, Zainab walked home through the darkening streets of Lagos, her mind numb, her body exhausted. She'd barely eaten in days. She'd barely slept. She was a ghost moving through the city that had killed everything she loved. She didn't notice the three men following her. She didn't realize she'd been marked for elimination until she turned into the alley near her flat and heard footsteps behind her. Too close. Too fast. She spun around just as the first blow landed. Pain exploded across her face. She stumbled, tried to run, but hands grabbed her, dragged her deeper into the alley, away from the street, away from witnesses. Please, she gasped, but another punch cut off her words. They beat her methodically, professionally. These weren't random thugs. They knew what they were doing. When she was on the ground, barely conscious, one of them pulled out a knife. Justice Callowell sends his regards, he said, his voice muffled behind a mask. Should have stayed quiet, girl. The knife plunged into her abdomen once, twice. White-hot pain, then spreading coldness. She heard them walk away, their footsteps echoing in the alley. Heard the distant sounds of Lagos, traffic, voices, life continuing while hers drained into the gutter. She tried to call for help, but only blood came out of her mouth. The stars above blurred, darkened. The pain faded to numbness. In her final moments of consciousness, Zainab thought of her father's smile, her mother's cooking, Ibrahim playing football in the street. All gone, all destroyed. And the men who'd done it would face no consequences. That was the last thought she had before the darkness took her. They left her there in the alley, bleeding out in the filth and shadows, another victim of power and corruption, another voice silenced. Just another dead girl from Mushin that no one would remember, left for dead. And as far as Lagos was concerned, Zainab Adeyemi was finished. No, is this really the end for Zainab? This is the darkest moment yet. Smash that like button if you're devastated. And subscribe to AfricanTales by Zion to find out what happens. Comment. Do you think she survived? 15 years later, 2024, the sun rose over Lagos Island, casting golden light across the skyline of gleaming towers and luxury developments. In a penthouse suite in Ikoyi, Tun Callowell, now 40 years old, stood on his balcony surveying his kingdom. 15 years had been very good to him. He was the CEO of Callowell Properties, one of the most successful real estate development companies in West Africa. His developments dotted the Lagos coastline. Luxury apartments, shopping complexes, gated estates for the wealthy. His net worth ran into billions of naira. He'd been married twice, both marriages ending in expensive divorces. But what did it matter? He could afford it. His current girlfriend was a video vixen half his age, and his social media accounts showed a life of endless parties, exotic vacations, and conspicuous wealth. He was untouchable, respected, feared, admired. The Cheikh Obi case? Ancient history. The Adeyemi girl? Dead and buried, literally. Occasionally, in quiet moments, he'd remember that night, the blood, the screams. But he'd learned to compartmentalize, to justify. They'd been young, reckless. That photographer had been in the wrong place at the wrong time. These things happened, and the girl, well, she should have minded her business. His father, Justice Michael Caldwell, was now semi-retired at 68, still influential, still connected, spending his golden years between Lagos and London, enjoying the fruits of a long and lucrative career on the bench. Neither of them thought about the Adeyemi family anymore. They were footnotes, casualties of a system that rewarded the strong and crushed the weak. Life was good. Life was perfect. Until it wasn't. The first crack appeared in February 2024. Chief Bello Ogunlade, the Minister of Justice who'd been their shield for over a decade, was forced to resign amid a corruption scandal. The new administration had come in with promises of reform, and Ogunlade was one of the first casualties. His offshore accounts exposed, his connections to various covered-up cases revealed. He fled to Dubai before he could be prosecuted. His replacement was Hawa Ibrahim, a no-nonsense reformist who'd built her career prosecuting government officials and powerful businessmen. She was ruthless, incorruptible, and she'd come into office with a mandate to clean house. We will review every suspicious case that was buried during the previous administration, she'd announced at her swearing-in. Justice delayed is not justice denied. Not anymore. Tun read the news with a flicker of unease, but he pushed it aside. That was 15 years ago. Ancient history. No one cared about a dead photographer from 2009. Then, in June 2024, the call came. Mr. Caldwell, this is Detective Aminu from the Special Crimes Unit. We need you to come in for questioning regarding the death of Chike Obi in 2009. Tun's blood ran cold. I don't know what you're talking about. Sir, we reopened the case based on new evidence. We can do this the easy way or the hard way. I prefer easy. That night, Tun called his father in panic. Justice Caldwell listened, then said calmly, "Don't worry. I'll make some calls. This will go away." But for the first time in his life, Justice Caldwell's calls didn't work. The new Minister of Justice had installed new people in key positions. People who couldn't be bought. People who didn't care about old connections. And they'd found something. An investigative journalist named Femi Badmus had been digging into cold cases connected to wealthy defendants whose cases had been mysteriously dropped. The Chike Obi murder was on his list. Badmus had tracked down David Adelik, one of Tun's accomplices from that night. David was dying, stage 4 lung cancer, given months to live, and he wanted to clear his conscience. "I was there," David told Badmus on camera, his voice weak but clear. "We killed him. Tun, Kola, Emeka, and me. We beat that photographer to death because he saw us with drugs and took pictures. Then we dumped his body in Badagry. Made it look like robbery. Justice Caldwell paid off the police, the prosecutors, everyone. We walked free because we had money and power." The video was devastating. A first-hand confession from one of the perpetrators. But there was more. Badmus had found security footage that had never been reviewed, a camera from a shop across from the event center, showing a black G-Wagon leaving the scene around the time of the murder. The plates matched the vehicle registered to Tun Caldwell in 2009, and bank records meticulously traced by forensic accountants, showing massive payments from Justice Caldwell to various police officers and court officials in the weeks following Chike Obi's death. The evidence was damning, ironclad, undeniable. In August 2024, Tun Caldwell was arrested and charged with murder. The news exploded across Nigeria. The privileged son of a powerful judge, finally facing justice for a crime committed 15 years ago. The media couldn't get enough. Tun's lawyers, the best money could buy, worked frantically to get the charges dropped. But the new prosecutor's office wasn't backing down. The trial was set for October 2024. Justice Caldwell, for the first time in his life, felt fear. Real fear. His son was facing life imprisonment. And there were rumblings that investigators were looking into his own conduct. All those cases he'd fixed. All those bribes he'd taken. His empire was crumbling. The trial began on a Monday morning in a packed courtroom in Lagos High Court. Media, activists, curious citizens. Everyone wanted to see if the powerful would finally face consequences. Tun sat at the defense table, wearing an expensive suit, but looking smaller somehow. Older, Afraid. His lawyers were confident, though. They'd successfully argued that David Adelique's deathbed confession was inadmissible due to his mental state from cancer medications. The security footage was grainy, inconclusive. The financial records could be explained away. "We'll get through this," his lead counsel assured him. "This case is circumstantial at best." Justice Caldwell sat in the gallery, watching, pulling strings behind the scenes, calling in every favor he still had. A few journalists who'd been critical suddenly went quiet. A witness who was supposed to testify for the prosecution suddenly developed amnesia. The old ways still had some power. The prosecution presented their case methodically. The confession video, the footage, the financial records, witness testimony from people who'd seen Tund and his friends with Chike Obi that night. But without a living witness to the actual murder, it was difficult. Tund's lawyers hammered away at the credibility of every piece of evidence. Where's the murder weapon? Where's the physical evidence? Where are the witnesses who actually saw my client commit this alleged crime? All we have is speculation, circumstantial evidence, and the ravings of a dying man seeking attention. The judge seemed sympathetic to the defense. The case was teetering. Then, on the fifth day of the trial, the prosecutor stood and said something that made Tund's blood freeze. "Your Honor, the prosecution would like to introduce an expert legal consultant who has been assisting with this case. She has expertise in judicial corruption and witness intimidation. We believe her insights will be valuable to these proceedings." The judge nodded. "Very well. Let her be called." "Your Honor," the prosecutor said, a slight smile on his face, "I'd like to call Zainab Hassan to the stand." The courtroom doors opened, and she walked in, 15 years older, dressed in a sharp barrister's robe with white collar tabs, her hair in a sleek professional bun. Her eyes, those same eyes that watched from a storage room window in 2009, now hard and focused. Tund's face went white. His father, sitting in the gallery, gripped the bench in front of him so hard his knuckles went white. It couldn't be. It was impossible. The girl they'd left bleeding in an alley 15 years ago, the girl they'd killed, was walking toward the witness stand very much alive. Zainab Hassan, senior advocate, human rights lawyer, expert in judicial corruption, took the stand. And when she turned to look at Tund Caldwell, her expression was ice. "Good morning," she said, her voice clear and strong. "Thank you for having me here today. I've waited 15 years for this moment." Tund couldn't breathe, couldn't think. His lawyer was whispering urgently in his ear, but he heard nothing over the roaring in his head. She was alive. The dead girl was alive, and she'd come back to destroy him. In the gallery, Justice Caldwell sat in shock, watching the ghost of his past materialize before his eyes. The girl he'd ordered beaten, stabbed, left for dead. She was here, in his courtroom, wearing the robes of justice. And she was looking right at him. This is going to be explosive. Zainab is alive. Was so silent. Did you see that? Breathing. Like this video. Every eye was fixed on the woman standing. And subscribe to AfricanTales by Zion for the epic finale. Radiating the quiet power that seemed to fill the space. Zainab Hassan, formerly Zainab Adeyemi, met Tund Caldwell's horrified gaze without flinching. The prosecutor approached the stand. "Ms. Hassan, thank you for joining us today. Can you please state your credentials for the court?" "Of course." Her voice was steady, controlled. "My name is Zainab Hassan. I'm a senior advocate of Nigeria, specializing in human rights law and judicial corruption. I hold a master's degree from Oxford University in international human rights law, and I've worked with various international organizations, including Transparency International and Human Rights Watch. For the past year, I've been consulting with the Ministry of Justice on reviewing cases involving potential judicial misconduct." Tund's lawyer shot to his feet. "Your Honor, I object. What does this witness's credentials have to do with this case? This seems like a waste of the court's time." "I'm getting to that," the prosecutor said smoothly. "Ms. Hassan, how did you become involved in the Chike Obi murder case?" Zainab's eyes never left Tund. "Because I was there the night he was killed. I witnessed his murder. And for the past 15 years, I've been working toward this exact moment." The courtroom erupted. Journalists scribbled furiously. The judge banged his gavel for order. Tun's lawyer was shouting objections, but the judge waved him down. I want to hear this. Continue, counselor. The prosecutor nodded to Zainab. Please tell the court what you witnessed on the night of October 15th, 2009. And Zainab told them everything. She described helping her father close up Emerald Gardens Event Center, walking to the storage room, hearing voices, looking through the window and seeing 4 young men, including Tun Kalawol, beating Chaik Obi to death. I saw Mr. Kalawol give the order, she said, her voice never wavering. I heard him say, make it quick. I watched them beat Chaik Obi until he stopped moving, until the blood pooled on the concrete floor. Then I heard Mr. Kalawol tell them to get their G-Wagon and dispose of the body in Betagri. And what did you do after witnessing this? I went to the police. I gave a full statement. I identified Tun Kalawol and described the vehicle. I did everything a citizen is supposed to do when they witness a crime. And what happened then? Zainab's jaw tightened. Then Mr. Kalawol's father, Justice Michael Kalawol, used his power and influence to destroy my entire family. The prosecutor gestured for her to continue. Tun Kalawol approached me at the police station, pretending to be a remorseful witness who wanted to help. For 2 weeks, he befriended me, visited my family, gained our trust. He was gathering intelligence, finding out exactly what I knew, what evidence existed, who else I had told. Once he had everything he needed, his father activated a plan to silence me permanently. She turned to look directly at Justice Kalawol in the gallery. The old judge's face was stone, but his eyes showed fear. My father, Alhaji Yusuf Adeyemi, was arrested on fabricated drug charges. Evidence was planted. He was denied bail by one of Justice Kalawol's colleague judges and sent to Kirikiri maximum security prison. 3 weeks later, he was dead, officially from a heart attack, but inmates reported he'd been poisoned. Objection! Tun's lawyer was on his feet. This is hearsay and has nothing to do with. It has everything to do with it. Zainab's voice rose for the first time, emotion breaking through a professional facade. It shows the systematic destruction of family who dare to testify against someone powerful. It shows consciousness of guilt. It shows exactly what these men are capable of. The judge banged his gavel. Overruled. The witness may continue. Zainab took a breath, regaining her composure. My mother, Khadija Adeyemi, was fired from her teaching position on false accusations of financial impropriety. She was blacklisted. My 16-year-old brother, Ibrahim, was expelled from school after drugs were planted in his locker. Our family was destroyed within 3 weeks of my giving testimony. And the case against Mr. Kalawol? Dropped. I was declared mentally unstable by a doctor on Justice Kalawol's payroll. My testimony was deemed unreliable. The murder of Chaik Obi was ruled a robbery, and the case went cold. What happened to your family after that? Zainab's voice grew quieter, but no less powerful. My father died in prison. My mother, unable to bear the grief and shame, took her own life. My brother Ibrahim, consumed with rage, confronted one of Tun's accomplices and was shot dead by security guards. The shooting was ruled self-defense. The courtroom was completely silent now. Even the journalists had stopped writing, simply listening. And what happened to you, Ms. Hassan? I was attacked in an alley near my home. 3 masked men beat me and stabbed me twice in the abdomen. Before I lost consciousness, one of them said, Justice Kalawol sends his regards. Should have stayed quiet, girl. They left me bleeding in a gutter, assuming I would die. But you didn't die. No, I was found by a street cleaner named Maman Ngozi. She took me to a doctor in Ajigunle, Dr. Emeka Okonkwo, who saved my life. He understood that if I went to a major hospital, I'd be found and finished off. So he treated me off the books, using a fake name. I spent 3 months in hiding, recovering. And then I disappeared. I left Lagos with a new identity, Zainab Hassan, and spent 15 years building myself into someone who could fight back. I worked every job I could find to put myself through university. I studied law because I wanted to understand the system that had destroyed my family. I wanted to learn how to dismantle it. She paused, her eyes sweeping across the courtroom. I excelled in my studies. I received scholarships. I was mentored by Professor Adiz Nwankwo, one of Nigeria's foremost human rights lawyers. I went to Oxford for my master's. I worked internationally with organizations fighting corruption and injustice. And all the while, I waited. I knew that eventually the political winds would shift, that eventually the corrupt ministers and judges who protected men like Tun Kalawol would fall. And they did fall. Yes, when Minister Ogunle was forced out and replaced by Minister Howard Brahim, I saw my opening. I returned to Nigeria as an expert consultant on judicial corruption, and when I heard that the Chike Obi case had been reopened, I offered my assistance. The prosecutor smiled. And now you're here. Now I'm here. Zainab turned back to Tund. I survived. I rebuilt. I became powerful. And I came back for justice, not just for Chike Obi, but for my father, my mother, my brother, and every other victim of powerful men who think they're above the law. The courtroom erupted in whispers, gasps, exclamations. The judge banged his gavel repeatedly, calling for order. Tun's lawyer immediately began his cross-examination, trying desperately to discredit her. Ms. Hassan, or should I say Ms. Adeyemi, isn't it true that you have a personal vendetta against my client? I have a commitment to truth and justice. If you consider that a vendetta, then yes. Isn't it true that 15 years ago, you were declared mentally unstable? By a corrupt doctor who was paid by Justice Kalawol to discredit me? Yes. How convenient that you return now, after 15 years, with an elaborate story. It's not a story. It's the truth. And I have evidence. She nodded to the prosecutor, who brought forward a file. What evidence could you possibly have from 15 years ago? The defense lawyer scoffed. Zainab smiled for the first time, a cold, satisfied smile. I have Dr. Okonkwo's medical records from when he treated my stab wounds, records he kept hidden for 15 years, documenting my injuries and my statement about who attacked me. I have testimony from Mama Ngozi, the woman who found me. I have my original statement to the police from 2009, which mysteriously disappeared from official records, but which I obtained a copy of before it vanished. And most importantly, she pulled out a small evidence bag. I have the knife they used to stab me. The knife I pulled from my own abdomen before I lost consciousness. The knife I kept hidden for 15 years. The knife that has Tun Kalawol's fingerprints on it. The courtroom exploded. Tun shot to his feet, his face white, screaming, "That's a lie. That's impossible." His lawyer tried to silence him, but the damage was done. The judge called for order, but the chaos continued. Justice Kalawol stood in the gallery, trying to leave, but found police officers blocking his path. Justice Kalawol, one of the officers said quietly, "Please remain seated. You'll be needed for questioning after these proceedings." Over the next 3 days, the trial continued. Zainab's evidence was verified. Dr. Okonkwo testified, confirming everything. Mama Ngozi testified, describing finding a dying girl in an alley. Forensic experts confirmed the fingerprints on the knife. The defense crumbled. Tun's other accomplices, Kola, Emeka, and the late David Adelik, were all implicated. 2 of them, faced with the overwhelming evidence in Zainab's testimony, made deals and confirmed everything. Yes, they'd killed Chike Obi. Yes, Justice Kalawol had orchestrated the cover-up. Yes, they'd ordered the attack on Zainab Adeyemi. All of it. True. On the final day, Zainab gave her closing statement, not as a witness, but as a special counsel to the prosecution. She stood before the court in her black robes, facing the judge, the jury, and most importantly, facing Tund and his father. "Your Honor, members of the jury, 15 years ago, I was a 19-year-old girl from Mushin who witnessed a murder and tried to do the right thing. For that, I lost everything. My father was framed and killed. My mother was driven to suicide. My brother was murdered. I was stabbed and left to die in a gutter." Her voice was steady, but her eyes blazed with righteous fury. These men, Tun Kalawol and his father, believed that power made them untouchable, that money and connections could erase any crime, that a poor girl from Mushin was disposable, her life worth nothing compared to their privilege. She walked toward the defense table, and Tun couldn't meet her eyes. But I didn't die. I survived, and I spent 15 years becoming someone who could stand here today and demand justice, not just for myself, but for Chaik Obi, whose only crime was being in the wrong place at the wrong time, for my family, who were destroyed for seeking truth, and for every other victim of corruption who never got their day in court. She turned to the jury. I ask you to send a message today. That power doesn't place anyone above the law. That money cannot buy immunity from justice. That the lives of poor people matter just as much as the lives of the wealthy. Find Tun Kalawol guilty. Make him face the consequences he's escaped for 15 years. Show Nigeria that justice isn't just for sale to the highest bidder. The deliberation took 6 hours. When the jury returned, the four women stood and read the verdict. In the case of the state versus Tun Kalawol on the charge of murder, we find the defendant guilty. The courtroom erupted. Tun collapsed in his chair. His lawyer immediately filed for appeal, but it wouldn't matter. The evidence was too strong. The testimony too credible. Tun Kalawol was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole for 25 years. But Zainab wasn't finished. Justice Michael Kalawol was arrested that same day and charged with corruption, obstruction of justice, conspiracy to commit murder, and judicial misconduct. The investigation into his decades of crimes had just begun, but the evidence was mounting. The old judge, who'd once been untouchable, was photographed in handcuffs, being led into police custody. His assets were frozen, his reputation destroyed. 1 month after the verdict, Zainab stood at the cemetery in Mushin, at the graves of her father, mother, and brother. The headstones were simple, all she'd been able to afford 15 years ago. Now, she commissioned new ones. Beautiful marble markers with their names, their dates, and the words. They sought truth. They died for justice. They are not forgotten. She placed flowers on each grave and knelt in the grass. I did it, she whispered. I got justice for you. For all of us. They're going to prison. They're going to pay for what they did. Tears streamed down her face, not tears of sadness, but of release, of finally completing the journey she'd started at 19 years old. I love you. I miss you. And I promise your deaths meant something. I'll make sure they meant something. 6 months later, Zainab established the Adeyemi Foundation for Justice, a nonprofit organization providing legal aid to victims of judicial corruption and powerful defendants. She used her international connections to secure funding, recruited brilliant young lawyers, and began taking on cases across Nigeria. The foundation's first client was a young man from Ajigunle whose sister had been killed by a governor's son. The case had been buried, the family threatened into silence. Sound familiar? Zainab sat across from the young man in her office, a far cry from the small flat in Mushin she'd grown up in, and saw herself in his desperate eyes. They think they can get away with it because they're powerful, he said. They think we don't matter because we're poor. Zainab reached across the desk and took his hand. They're wrong, and I'm going to prove it to them. Again. She'd become what her father always hoped she'd be, someone who stood for truth and justice, no matter the cost. But she becomes something more too, a force that the powerful had to reckon with, a voice that couldn't be silenced, a survivor who turned her pain into purpose. Justice Michael Kalawol and his son Tun both stood trial over the following year. Both were convicted. The judge received 15 years for corruption and conspiracy. His empire, built on bribes and abuse of power, was dismantled. Tun's accomplices were all convicted and sentenced. The system that had protected them for so long finally held them accountable. And at the center of it all was Zainab, the girl they tried to bury, who'd risen from the dead to become their judge, jury, and the instrument of their reckoning. On the 1-year anniversary of Tun's conviction, a journalist asked Zainab how it felt to finally get justice. She thought for a long moment before answering. Justice delayed is painful. My family didn't live to see this day. That will always hurt. But justice achieved, no matter how late, still matters. It tells other victims that their stories matter. That truth matters. That no one is truly untouchable. She paused, then added, and it tells the powerful that they should think twice before crushing the powerless. Because some of us don't stay crushed. Some of us rise. And when we do, we remember everything. The journalist asked one final question. What would you say to the 19-year-old Zainab bleeding in that alley if you could go back? Zainab's eyes glistened. I'd tell her, hold on, survive. Because 15 years from now, you'll walk into a courtroom wearing the robes of justice, and the men who try to silence you will have no choice but to listen. Your family's deaths will not be in vain. Your pain will become power. And you will prove that justice, no matter how long it takes, can still find its voice. And it had. That's justice. That's power. That's why we never give up. Smash that like button if the story moved you. Subscribe to AfricanTales by Zion for more incredible stories of courage and redemption. And share this with everyone who needs to know that truth always wins in the end. Comment below. What was your favorite moment? Thank you for taking this journey with us. Remember, no matter how dark things get, hold on. Your day of justice will come. Until next time, stay strong and keep fighting for what's right.